this is what we are going to do. Let's look at page 9 and read over the persuasive speech. A persuasive speech is one that urges an audience to change or reinforce their attitudes, beliefs, values, or actions. So in this time, if we start to think about it, the idea of persuasion is often met with a lot of apprehension. It is oftentimes met with skepticism. We've been around long enough in our lives now that we've been persuaded in ways that were maybe harmful to us, that didn't benefit us. When we are met with persuasion, we then become often wary in many circumstances and situations due to these experiences we've had, or really like also the news and how we read about individuals being persuaded, or when we see things that we believe, oh my gosh, this is so logically harmful. Like, how in the world is anybody actually going with this, right? So those are the things that we can oftentimes look at. When we become wary of this persuasion, it really makes us think of persuasion as this thing that individuals are always trying to force you to do, that they're trying to get their maybe agenda met. But persuasion doesn't always have to be that way. Persuasion can be to reinforce your existing attitudes or values or beliefs, right? Like the things that you are already believing in, giving you extra ammunition as to why you believe in it. For example, people go to church every Sunday. Sometimes, whatever their church may be. I'll use that. They already believe. They're simply reinforcing with that message in different ways, in different forms, to assist them to understand why they believe in their spirituality or their faith a little bit more. The same thing is, we oftentimes will hear speeches that already pertain to us or that we already believe in. So it doesn't always have to be that we're trying to make you change or that we're forcing you to believe our different ways. No. Now, it can actually be for us to change somebody's beliefs, to change their thought process, to get them to take a different step of action. And so persuasion can be incredibly helpful for us to learn about in two different ways. And I like to look at it first for you personally as a speaker. What a great skill to have. One, we will be persuading oftentimes within our lives. Not only will we be advocating on behalf of ourselves, because it's not always wrong to advocate on behalf of ourselves or get what we need, i.e. a job, right? Or maybe an extension on a paper, or perchance I want to get a raise, or I'd like to convince somebody to let me go on, a trip around the world. Who knows? Maybe I want to propose that, I get to take the business trip this month instead of somebody else. We have a lot of things that we can do to use persuasion to benefit ourselves. But if we also look at it in the area of our civic and social lives, persuasion is also very important, so that we know that we can speak about what we are passionate about. There are a lot of things that are going on in the world, and for each of you to be able to articulate agreement or disagreement with something in a structured and sound way is quite a gift. It also assists you in argumentation. Lots of people fear arguments because they have never been involved in them before. And oftentimes emotions, of course, come heavily played into arguments, but understanding how to make a simple argument and supporting your point with facts without even having to have an emotional issue attached to it are so very possible. But at this time in our life where everybody seems to have a voice, where everybody is gifted an opinion via technology, television, the world, it's important that we remember our ethics of speech, our ethics of freedoms of speech, and we maintain those through an effective and sound, mindful creation of arguments. Ones that are grounded in logic, ones that are free from fallacies, which are errors in reasoning. Now, the other thing that I love about persuasion is that not only are you getting to advocate for yourself and on behalf of those issues that are important to you, and at least learning some of the basics and foundations of that, But additionally, you know what else? Other people are out there doing what? Trying to persuade too. 80% of your day is spent in persuasion. So it's a good thing to come to understand. It can help in so many ways. Making effective decisions. Being able to call somebody out on a bad argument. Being able to know when somebody is not telling the truth. Those are a lot of different qualities that will come from understanding this basic formation of argumentation and the basic structure of persuasion, and also starting to understand where errors in reasoning can come from. So that when people are trying to sell you an argument, but they're just taking down a group of individuals, you know what to call that, and you know how to call that out. These are really great tools to have. So when I say 80% of your day is spent in persuasion, is that hard to believe? Did we come to school via vehicle? On the side of the road, did you see any advertisements? Oh, good. If they should, I don't know, read your social media and then see an advertisement for those 1,600 sweaters you were looking for on Amazon. Who knows? This pop-up advertisements are things all the time. Individuals just encouraging you, I don't know, to go to the movies, go somewhere different, do something different. These are all different ways that we are persuaded. If we're listening to the radio, if we're watching TV, if we're engaged in any kind of media, you are oftentimes being persuaded. Some type of commerce is typically attached to it. Your instructors persuade you, your friends persuade you, your family persuades you. So being constantly engaged in it, it would be good to know about it so that we can make, again, sound decisions, so that we can be active agents of our own destiny, so that we don't get swindled into things that we don't need. All of that. So that is the definition of persuasive speaking, but let's give you what this speech is going to require. So you're going to be required to follow all the principles of good delivery, and a particular emphasis is going to be placed on choosing a variety of supporting materials. All of us, I'm going to encourage to actively look for different types of supporting materials. And we'll go over this when we discuss some ethos, pathos, and logos. But it's important to understand that not everybody is going to be persuaded simply on numbers, just because we know that, for example, if it's like, oh, you're telling me to exercise, right? Then, okay, 62% of people who exercise felt better. You're like, okay, I don't know if I'm going to make it that 62%. So we may oftentimes need to find other resources. So this is where like stories or testimonies or examples or analogies are going to be very important for each of us to start to explain and maybe build upon our ideas. So you're going to need to find good supporting materials, find out what's new, what's novel, what's going on, information that you can provide to us that is related to the audience of whom you are speaking. And your information also, these supporting materials are going to be important because they are really going to be working to defend the claims that you are making in order to persuade your audience. And they can also be used to attack the counter arguments that you will be presenting as well. You're going to need to be conducting research on your topic. That research, we know, should be credible, should be reliable, and this should certainly come within the past at least 5 to 10 years. If this is something like we're talking about, I don't know, like even like cancer research, something like that, that should not be like 10 years worth of research of time. That time has been too slow, and so really like keeping your research within the past 5 years to have a representative account, to really understand numbers, to see what the problems or the situation actually is going to be really important. Yes. You are going to have to conduct research also to present in your speech. And how many are we required to present this time? Yes, 3 again. Good. 3 again. So this means that you're going to take 3 different outside sources and you are going to use them as support. Remember, either as an example, a statistic, a testimony, you're going to paraphrase, quote, or perchance summarize the ideas that you are giving. Make sure that we hear the attributions, the credibility of the source itself out loud in your speech. written in your outline, and then in the works cited page. So it must be done in those 3 ways. Research also can be done in the form of websites. However, remember, make sure that the websites are credible in regards to radar standards. And also make sure that when you're citing your websites out loud that you're giving the credibility and the attribution to it. Why is this a source that should be believed or validated? You're also going to be expected to follow the basic principles of good delivery like we talked about. Keep that extemporaneous delivery going, eye contact, gestures, engagement, watching our language and practicing our ums and uhs. And you will also be required to have at least one visual aid that aids in the development of your speech. It will be an excellent supporting material, and you may want to have even more than one visual aid. But on the back of that page is your checklist, which is your checklist for page, or it's on page 10. It's a checklist for your persuasive speech. We are on a very serious time schedule now, everyone. So what does that mean? That means that this checklist should not be discovered when we walk into class on our speech day. I want you to have your preparation outline and your evaluation sheet stapled together before you come into the class. Put your name on it before you come into the class. Then all you have to do is put a number on it when you get into class and set up your visual aid. It's like you're already done, which is great. So please make sure that you are doing that. For those of you, also make sure that you are coming on time to set up your visual aids and save them to the desktop before the speech. For those of you who are delivering your speech, anybody else doing makeup speeches tomorrow? 1, 2, just you 2. Okay, then never mind, we've already talked about it. Fantastic. Okay, that being said, on the next page after that is your evaluation sheet, so you can go ahead and simply attach that. So those are the things that you can keep in mind. You know what you'll be evaluated on, you know what you need to bring, and you know the prompt, it's all there. So we're on page 9 of our packets. Now we're going to turn those pages, though, over to page 24, did I say?
45.
I don't know. What did I say?
45.
Great, 45, everybody. Let's get those up and going. And so those of you who just walked in, please note that these are the assignments that we're going to have to do tonight. You're going to be putting your persuasive pieces topic approval to the discussion board. I'm going to send all this out on an email. I got my break from LMU today. So you'll get this. But let's go ahead and open up to page 45. At the top of that page there, you're going to see a little something that says persuasive speaking, colon. What? Do you see that? You know the answer. What? Oh, yes, it's, a speech that seeks to. And you can all go back. Yeah, sure, it does. Definitely speaks to persuade. But it's persuasive speaking. They're speeches that seek to change or reinforce one's beliefs, attitudes, values, or actions. We, or hopefully we all, when you did your reading over the weekend, you came to understand that we are going to be focusing solely on the proposition of policy. The page 46 has propositions of fact and value, but we are not going to be going over them. However, your proposition of policy will more than likely include issues that would be brought up in propositions of fact as well as value. But the proposition that we are going to be working on specifically is one of policy. And now, Amanda, you keep saying this word proposition. What in the world are you talking about? Well, in this speech, rather than having a central idea or a specific purpose, the word now becomes a proposition. So for our homework assignment, we are going to need, I did not tell you, just this camera. We are going to be coming up with your general purpose, your proposition, and your thesis statement. A proposition is simply taking the place of that specific purpose or that central idea. It's the one claim or the unifying statement that you're going to have run throughout the entire speech process. But before we can even get to that, we need to talk a little bit about this proposition, or in fact, what these propositions are. Sorry, let me get to page 45. And it says there on your sheet, there we go. Depending upon the proposition you have, it will always influence your pattern of organization for your main points. But the good news is that for each of you, since we are doing the same proposition, you are all going to have the exact same main points. So it's pretty easy to write. But, again, before we do that, let's look at this proposition. So when have you heard the words proposition before?
During midterm elections.
Oh my gosh, during midterm elections, yes.
That's it.
Thank you, yes, that's when you heard it. So what were they during midterm elections?
Proposed laws for the government.
Sure.
Yeah, the proposed pieces of public policy that would, if agreed to by the electorate, would be enacted as laws.
There's two choices, and both sides try to persuade you to choose their side. Like, so there's a proposition, but there's a in the proposition you can whether or not you choose yes or no. Different people are trying to persuade you to choose one side or the other.
Absolutely, yeah. So the proposition is written, right? Just like your proposition will be written. And hopefully a persuasive speech is not one that only has one side. It should have multiple and many different types of perspectives and sides is a persuasive speech. To persuade my audience that the sun will come up tomorrow is not a persuasive speech. Can you debate it? It's going to happen. It's not even something worth going into. You are very right. These policies for both of you, and good, but there are two different sides. Usually the pro and the con is how they'll do it. Even though there's probably a million and one other ones, it's really just like a for and against. But let's talk about this proposition. So if these propositions are what you want, like maybe a policy, a law, a rule, a guideline, to be implemented or to be changed. Where else do you hear proposals or propositions? You'll do it a lot in work. Oftentimes individuals will bring forth a proposal, like, ooh, I propose that we're going to take on business with these individuals. I believe that I want to propose that we implement this structure, something like that. In your later academic career, you will be potentially writing proposals about papers or research projects that you will be doing. So you'll be putting forth, when you say, this is what I really want to do, this is where I want to go. When the Chad proposed, he got down on one knee and hoped I would say no. He hoped I would say,
Yes.
A proposition is what you want your audience to say at the end of the speech. Write that down. A proposition is what you want your audience to say yes to at the end of the speech. And one more time for the cheap seats, the proposition is what you want your audience to say
Yeah
to at the end of the speech. Good. At the end of the speech, everything that you should do, this is what you want them to agree with. Now, this is the pickle about the proposition. And this is where you may have been a little bit confused in your head. Like, wait, there's pro, there's con. Wait, there's only one. Yes, there is. Propositions are always written for you to say yes to it. A proposition, what you want your audience to say yes to. So back in the day, there was this proposition, Prop 8. It was about same-sex marriage. It was like, yes on Prop 8, and people were like, yay, that sounds great. What a good idea. We should totally have same-sex marriage. But I don't know why everybody forgot that same-sex marriage was already illegal in California. Or that they thought that we wanted to, like, reinforce the law. Like, that's right, let's keep it, like I don't even know, it was so funny. So the unfortunate part is that to vote yes on Prop 8 meant that you were voting no for same-sex marriage. Does that make sense? Because the proposition was written that they didn't want same-sex marriage. It's going to be illegal again. It needs to be defined as only a man and a woman. Vote yes to only a man and a woman. Does that make sense? So that's what the yes on 8 was so confusing about. Now, can you write it like this? Yes. Did it clearly persuade a large amount of people? Yes. Did the court system take it back and say, this was not right? Sneaky genes? Yes. And so that's when repealed back in the Happy Same-Sex Marriage California came back. But propositions can be tricky, and individuals write persuasion tricky, and they do that on purpose, oftentimes. That's when we should also be aware of that trickiness. But now that you know that propositions are written for you to say yes to, they're wanting me to say yes to say no about, right? Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Yay! So keep that in mind as you go forward. But for each of us, now we need to come up with this thing like a proposition. A proposition of policy is one that we will be doing in this class. It is a very common form of policy that you will hear all the time. Speech that you'll hear all the time. Yes, we think of policies as rules and regulations and oftentimes, standards or, like we're saying, policies. These things that go into play, but policies, speeches don't always have to be about a law or putting a rule in or regulation. It is simply, and here comes the definition, get ready to write it, a proposition apology urges the audience to take action on something. So proposition and policy urges the audience to take action on something. We need to urge our audience to do something. And that's hopefully what each of you came to an understanding about with the reading as well, is that rather than simply telling us a value speech or a fact speech, this is where we're going to urge the audience to take action. And oftentimes the reason that I say fact and value, and let me give you a simple understanding of this idea of fact and value. Even if you flip over your page and you want to look at it with me real quick onto the back side, even though we won't be going over these. A proposition of value is one that will always have the words good, bad, right, wrong, moral, immoral, just, unjust, right? So we want to make sure that we don't have any of those words in our proposition. Those propositions will oftentimes be then ones of value and not policy. If you, like I said though before, we will oftentimes have things that are good or bad or right or wrong within our speech, and we can talk about that, but the proposition itself should not maintain or have those particular words within them. The other thing that I want to make you aware of are these propositions of fact. So propositions of fact are simple assertions that we want to prove true, or maybe we want to prove false. To persuade my audience to persuade my audience that drinking 8 glasses of water a day is beneficial to their health. Am I urging you to do anything? No. All I want you to say yes to at the end of my speech is that water, 8 times a day, is beneficial to my health. Maybe that will encourage you to do it, but that's not what my speech is about. My speech is about just telling you about that it's beneficial for you to believe that idea. To persuade my audience that taking a public speaking class will benefit their future career. Am I telling you to take one?
No.
I'm simply telling you that it is going to?
Beneficial.
Yeah, I want you to believe that it's beneficial to your future. Does that make sense to y'all? So these facts and values are enough. But let's make sure that each of us are getting a policy. And how do we do that? Well, let's go and create our topic and we can start to look at it. But we may need to take a couple steps back, yeah.
Wait, so you said we could use facts and value in our speech or no?
Inside the speech?
Right.
Yes. As the proposition? No. And it kind of went over this in the reading, this idea that so don't look at the values and facts anymore. Don't let it confuse you. We'll stick to the policy, but your speech itself, the body, the supporting materials, some of the claims that you make, very possibly will have facts and value arguments in them. But it's not going to be what we're going to say yes to at the end. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's going to be utilized within it, but not there.
Okay.
Coming up with a topic. Hopefully you have started to think, okay, well, what do I want my audience to do? What do I want them to take action on? How do we want to go forward? And it's hard because this is going to be up to each and every single one of you to come up with your own topic. Like always, I'm going to say two things. Pick something that you're excited about. If you're excited about it, we're going to be excited about it, and you'll want to research it. The second thing is to pick something that is narrow enough for you to be able to accomplish speaking about it in 5 to 7 minutes. Taking on the entirety of gun control is way too much. However, taking on a small piece of that, much more manageable. For example, if instead of saying for my well-being, I wanted to persuade my audience to drink 8 glasses of water a day for skin health. Now I've narrowed the focus a bit. Or just for digestion. Now at least I've narrowed my focus in that point. Does that make sense to y'all? And so that may be more manageable in a 5 to 7 minute speech. But the topic is going to be very important, narrowed, and also in identifying who am I wanting to speak to and what are the solutions to this topic. Because if I'm telling you to take action, I better be giving you some ways to take that action. How are we going to do this? How are we going to accomplish this? Let's go back, however, to the topic really quick. Because what I want you all to look at is to go back to the research. When we went to the library, so on your library page, we looked at databases. And the databases that we looked at covered a variety of different topics. But remember, one of the questions on your speech or on your library assignment was like, what 2 sources should I use for my persuasive speech? Well, this is what you should be looking at. Down here, there is something called opposing viewpoints in context. If we click on opposing viewpoints in context, the great thing is that these are controversial topics that have multiple positions or multiple sides. And what that means is there's a bunch of tons of information, but also it's going to give you the different viewpoints on that topic. So let's say I don't even know what I want to do my topic on. I can certainly start to examine some of these amazing topics that are listed here. Even if I wanted to look at something like teen suicide, right? Here is my topic per se. But what the great part about this website is it's much like that of a Wikipedia, where it can give you, on this first page, a holistic look at what's going on with the topic in general already. But the other fun point, if you look over here, here are the viewpoints. There's 19 journal articles that they've given you. 55 other viewpoints if you wanted to see those. Some references, images, videos, audio, magazines, statistics, websites, related topics. Holy moly, all right? This is such a great resource for each of you because not only can it provide you with everything that you need to make a speech, but it can also help you in starting to narrow down your argument. So for example, like what we want to see is there a specific area of suicide? Because if we think about it, I want to speak about suicide, sure, the solution is don't do it. But that's not what the answer is, right?
Yeah.
There are, for every single problem that's going on, sure, there's 2 sides, but there's about 17 different reasons as to why it's going on. So before we get to the end where they're doing it and we're saying, don't do it, there could be about 17 other things in our society, in our families, in our homes, in our schools, that could be done in order to assist with maybe teen suicide. And so it's important for us to go back and look at some of those because that is going to be maybe what we not only focus on, but then what we also start to look for in our solutions. People always ask the question, well, why do women get paid less than men? It's like, how much time do you have? Because to ask why women get paid less than men. Sure, there's that one where the person's like, okay, you, and then you, and less. But that's not so often. The other things that happen are the million other things. Early childhood education in STEM, maternity leave, bias in particular industries, right? Like there's so many different reasons that contribute to it that you could examine one of those instead. So in regards to like teen suicide, sure, if that's the topic that you're interested in, this is a horrible thing that is happening, what can we do to prevent it from going forward? The other thing that this website can also give you some insight on, or a basic overview of your topic, is also starting to see who can make the change. Is it, in fact, my audience here, or is it other systems or agencies? Does that make sense to y'all? So I encourage you all to look through here, even if you have a topic that you like, if you don't have a topic that you like, or if there is one here or not. It's a lot of great information, and especially this area here where it says related topics. Because down here you could maybe start to look like, oh yes, these are the different things that are contributing to it. Maybe we could start to work on bullying instead, and that would assist. Does that make sense, y'all? So take some time, look through this research if you have yet to come up with a topic, and hopefully it can inspire you. If you already have your topic, you can also look at the opposing viewpoints and see what are they saying, or should I narrow it a little bit more, maybe what are some solutions or ideas that they have to try to help this issue. The other thing that I would do is that once you have your topic, so let's say I was interested in bullying and I was interested in maybe cyberbullying specifically, and then looking at how cyberbullying potentially is affecting teen suicide. Well, then what I could also do is I can look at other types of organizations or any type of other work that's already being done to try to assist these individuals and help in the don't want to say the problem, because I want to say the epidemic of the suicide. Who's helping? Who's doing things? Outside sources. Like, what are resources? What are schools doing? What is everybody doing? Or is there like a nonprofit that is actively working against this? Looking at their websites is always great because they're going to lay out their argument the exact same way as you will. The opposing viewpoints, however, also is important because it has the opposition. It has why people are against, and it has why people are maybe not for, or why they're on the fence for this particular topic. And that's going to be important when we get into developing our main points a little bit further. Any questions thus far, y'all? Feeling okay? Know where to go for the... Okay, fantastic. So what are we going to need to do for our homework? You are going to need to create a general purpose, and then not a specific purpose, not a central idea. This time it's called Everybody A. And for everybody who just walked in, we are on page 45. And the word proposition, what does it mean? Well, my friends, it means what you want your audience to say yes to at the end of the speech. So you can, what you want your audience to say yes to at the end of the speech. So, we know that every speech that we ever hear in our whole lives will always fall under three different types of purposes. To inform, to entertain. I did that in my last class for like 10 minutes. Everyone was like,
dance.
Persuade. I was like that. No. And then yours, everyone, is to persuade. So go ahead, write that down. You're almost done with the homework. You can write it anywhere, but you can just write, a separate little general purpose. To persuade. So now we know what the entire purpose is. Our job is to persuade, and there is a fine, fine line between informational speaking and persuasive speaking, because we will still have to give information in our persuasive speech, but how do we start to make that come alive with the actual assertion that we want them to do something? That's what we'll work on when we get into arguments. For now, let's work on this proposition. So friends, this needs to be one clear claim. let's talk about what that clear claim looks like. There are two different types of policy, as you'll see there on page 45. The first type of policy is a policy for passive agreement, and the second type of policy is for immediate action. By very basic definition, passive agreement means your audience can't take action on it right now, or they don't have the agency to take action on it, but they can agree that the action either needs to be done, or in the future, when it comes time, they can take that action. So let me give you real-world examples. Does that make, do you need me to repeat that? Do you want to write it down again? Page 45. You're good. We're not doing propositions of factor value, just policy. So passive agreement. These are policies that people can't take immediate action on, or they don't have the agency to be able to take action on. Passive agreement. Then immediate action, in contrast, these are things that you could do right now. You could leave the class and go out and do it, or at least do it in the next couple days. Why does that matter? Well, it does for a lot of reasons. And again, this goes back to your audience and your solutions. So we'll keep coming back to this idea. My audience, as we've been referring to it, is the people in front of me. So you can keep this as your audience if you would like to. But you may not have a topic whereby your audience can take immediate action. And so that audience may be defined as either a particular group, maybe a government, maybe a person, maybe an agency itself, I'm not quite sure. A passive, so if I want to do immediate action, to persuade my audience to drink 8 glasses of water a day, could you go out and do that today?
Yes.
Yes, and that's all of you, and you're capable of doing it. Fantastic. To persuade my audience to start exercising.
I mean, you can do that today.
You could do that today if you wanted. You could also do it within the next week or something like that. Right? Absolutely. So these are things that you could take immediate action on. To persuade my audience to change the parking at Santa Monica College.
That's not immediate. That is passive.
That's law.
Yeah.
Because you can't take action.
Can't do it immediately. Okay, great. So you understand the solution. So go back to the audience. What's the problem with that statement? To persuade my audience to change Santa Monica
I
parking.
mean, we can't do it anyways.
Can't do it anyway.
We can vote on something that
Maybe.
changes parking.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. When was the last
I
time you
don't know.
voted on
Yeah,
something?
no.
I mean, midterms.
No, it's for
Okay.
school,
Oh.
right? That's the other thing, right? Like the board does this for you. So in turn, is it going to be to persuade my audience?
No.
However, so I could do to persuade SMC's, I don't know who's in charge.
Parking lot.
In there, let's say parking, that parking needs to change. That is passive agreement.
Oh.
You can't do anything, and our audience, though, is now who?
Parking people.
The parking people. So everything we write and we speak to is who?
Towards the
Them. However, secret option C, to persuade my audience that the SMC parking department must add more parking to campus. Now, I'm persuading you that something should be done
By someone else.
by someone else. Passive agreement. Does this make sense? And each of those different audiences determines and changes the way that these solutions will be laid out and what you're going to do. Does that make sense too? And don't worry, we'll get around to that when we get around to like organizing your solutions and stuff. But for me, it is incredibly important that each of you know what your policy is. So you want us to drink water. Does drinking water really make me better? Does that make sense? I have a lot of students, like, yours will be much easier, but it's like when we're taking on these, like, big, broad topics, it's like, you know, so that something can change. It's like, no, you have to be specific and, like, make it something specific. Nobody has to write a law here, although that you're more than welcome to, like, put in a new law. In my last class, I had a student who was like, to persuade my audience that strict gun laws save lives.
Whoa.
Is that a proposition of policy?
That's an opinion.
Oh, that's a good.
It's a fact, right? That they're going to try to, sorry, that's a proposition of fact that they're going to try to assert is true. So proposition of fact, all you're doing is trying to assert that the claim is true or it's false.
So that you should.
So I was like, So then she was like, okay, so they should just take on, like, I go, so what do you want to change? And she said, well, I think I wanted to either, you know, like there was all these laws. Like there was the one like, you know, that they can't have magazines or that they can't, you know, there's a stricter mental issues. They said that is what you suggest to persuade my audience that blank policy be implemented to save lives, right? And so now we know that this policy should be implemented. We can passively agree with it, and then the next time that action comes up, we can say, yay. If we were convincing the people to write the policy, or we were convincing lawmakers, let's say, I have a student who is saying that to persuade my audience that comprehensive sex education must be offered in K through 12 elementary schools. So in that case, she is not going to tell you about like different things, but instead she's going to write out a practical plan. First it'll implement it in this way, then it'll go into this way, and then it'll be implemented this way. Does that make sense to you? So the audience that you have is going to determine how you also lay out the solutions. Is it going to be laid out for them to do, or is it going to be laid out for us to, like, if I'm drinking 8 glasses of water a day, there's a bunch of different ways I could do that. It's not just like sit down with 8 glasses of water. No. But like there's other ways that you can get that water in, and you can give other alternative suggestions to all of us, rather than just listing out one policy and telling us how to implement it. Although that's also possible. Does that make sense? All right, let's try to write this. So we have our general purpose, this to persuade. And then we're going to write our proposition. And remember, all we're going to do is bring down those same words, to persuade. And then typically here you have what?
The audience.
Yeah, like my audience, right? But in this case, I don't know your audience yet. So I'm simply going to put here for chosen audience. You can choose your words if you want to. Then I have added this word, that. We talked about this before when it came time to write your proposition for the informative speech. When we say the word about, to persuade my audience about drinking 8 glasses of water a day. Am I persuading you to do anything?
It's more informative.
It's informative. About is an informative word. Do not use about. If after your audience you simply place the word that after it, you are going to get a persuasive proposition. Does that make sense? So use the word that. And the other way that we know we have a proposition of policy is it will typically include the words should or should not. Does it have to? No. But it'll help make sure that you have that one idea. Should or should not. Because I can say something like, to persuade my audience to volunteer at Habitat for Humanity. Did I say should or should not? Did you get that I wanted you to take action? Yes. It doesn't have to, but if you're working on your writing and you're thinking, oh gosh, I really want to make sure that I have this right, simply add in that word. So I'm going to say the words should not. Then I'm going to add what I want them to not do, which is my policy. I'm going to add here drink and drive. Again, if you have something that you wanted to add on here to narrow your focus, you can. This topic doesn't necessarily warrant one, like the drinking of the water for better skin, the riding your bike to save money, right? Like you can designate it in those ways, or that to persuade my audience that they should not use photoshopping apps on social media, and then I can narrow it like to reduce body dissatisfaction in adolescent girls. Does that make sense? You can just use it as a period, but you can also narrow your focus specifically. Huh? Oh. No.
So after you say that, like the circle with that, are you supposed to also put in like that you or that?
Oh,
that they?
thank you. I did not add that word.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's
But
complete
if your
sentence.
audience, if like the audience here today is who you're speaking to, then
Yeah.
Okay. And then I have so many questions. So then for your chosen audience, like you just insert like a government officials.
Totally.
Okay.
And you could even do to persuade my audience that government officials should. Right. But that's also a question.
No.
All good questions. Does this make sense to you? Fantastic. To create your thesis statement, remember that a proposition and main points are going to create your thesis. Why do I say remember that? Because a central idea and your main points are your thesis statement. And that's exactly what this is. So all I'm going to do to start out my thesis is bring this statement down. I'm going to start it there. To persuade my audience that they should not drink and drive. Does that make sense? So that's the first part. But what are we missing?
The main points.
That's right. But guess what? What's the good news? All of you are going to have similar main points. Huh? And why is that? Because I like to have you jump through hoops? No. Because psychologists have been working and experts have been working for years to find out how is an audience most likely going to receive messages. How are you going to be now most persuaded based upon actions, getting you to do something? That's a big deal. How do we get people to take action? How do we move people? How do we get them to do something? And how do we do it in a mindful and ethical way? Well, organizing the main points is going to be a great assistant or a helper to this. And so, just open up a new document. When you were younger, well, hold on. There's three things that we have to remember in a propositional policy. There has to be a need. And we talked about that at the beginning. To persuade my audience that the sun will rise tomorrow is not, there's no need for me to give that speech. It's going to happen. Persuade my audience that France will become the 51st state. It's not going to happen. Just leave it, darn it, I know we won't. So there has to be a need. And if we're going to establish that, we also have to have a plan. And that plan has to be practical. And that plan's practicality is also based on my audience. Can I just cut federal funding to military aid? No. Could I cut like a little piece maybe? Can I tell you all to give me $1,000? I could, but is it practical? No. It's not probably going to be our best way. So we need to have a need. So the thing about getting people to motivate and take action with policies is going to be based on our first main point. when you were younger, whoever reared you growing up, your parents, grandparents, aunt, uncle, whatever, whoever raised you, and they said the words, "Go clean your room," your first response wasn't, "No." At least mine wasn't. Your response instead was, "Why? Why do I need to clean my... I'm so happy sitting with all these clothes around me. I need that pizza. I may use it and need it later. I'm hungry. In the middle of the night. I want to take a bite. Leave it." Why? You were fine with it. You didn't see the need. And so, if you, as of 18 to plus years old, have been sitting around not doing something for this long, you've become pretty complacent in your sitting. So we need to first establish there's a problem with you sitting on that tuchus and not getting up and doing something. So we have to establish that there's a need. And how do we do that? Well, we do it by discussing these little things called problems. You're talking about this policy because there's a problem with it not being there in the first place. Or you're talking about them doing this because there's issues that come about from them not participating, acting, drinking the water, etc. So your first main point, I'm going to type this because it'll be faster in the interest of time. And I'm going to make this an appropriate size for all of you. Oh, and of course that one. So main point 1 is going to be the problems that exist from not having your policy. So from not having your policy. I don't want you to give me a speech on, so first I'll tell you the problems when people don't drink and drive. There aren't any problems. There are only problems when people don't have your policy. So first I'll tell you the problems with not drinking 8 glasses of water a day. First I'll next tell you the problems with, I'll first tell you the problems with not exercising 3 times a week. Does this make sense to y'all? Okay, fantastic. So if we had our speech, it would look something like this. To persuade my audience that they should not drink and drive. That's my proposition, right? I will first discuss the problems with drinking and driving.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not having policies to
Are there problems with drinking and driving? Yes. Are there problems with not drinking and driving? No. So I'm going to first tell you the problems with drinking and driving. Good. Now, back in the day, Jack and Judy, my parents called them the Jack and the Judes for reference, were supporters of the Republican Party during the Bush term, first Bush term. Not Bush Sr., sorry, I'm talking like Bush Jr. first term.
Like W. Bush.
George W. All right, thanks. Bush Jr. George W. So so during the campaign for the second election, I'm at my parents' house. I remember this distinctly. And I pick up the phone, and they're like, "Hello, may I please speak with Judy Aquino?" And I said, "Who's calling, please?" And they said, "This is the Republican National Convention calling." And I was like, good luck. So I put the phone down because my mom loves her some politics. And so she gets on the phone, and what they're asking her is, "Thank you, Mrs. Aquino, for your donations before. We want to ensure that we have your vote for, President Bush for the next election. Can we count on it? And would you like to make a donation?" And my mom's answer was, "No, I'm not going to make a donation, and I don't know if I'm going to vote this year." And so the intern didn't just simply hang up the phone and go, "Okay, well, great, thanks."
Yeah.
What'd they say?
They try to convince you.
Why?
Why?
Yeah.
Because that is a great source of information gathering. Because the next time that George Bush comes to California and speaks to women between a specific demographic, he best bring up what topics?
The
ones
ones
that
The ones that my mom very happily laundry listed off. And healthcare, and No Child Left Behind, and women's health, right, all these different things. So he better talk about those, because for him to just talk about what he's already talking about is clearly not pushing anybody to the side. This is what we call a target audience. Starting to identify in our audience who's on the fence with us and who's completely against us, and why. because this is our opportunity to get as many people as we can on our side. We already know that the people who are listening are maybe like an open and receptive, and individuals are maybe already doing it. But the people on the fence, or the people who are against it, those individuals are the ones that we need to continue to encourage. And so this is where you are going to address your opposition. You are going to bring up the claims as to why people don't drink 8 glasses of water a day. Why aren't they exercising 3 times a week? Why are they not volunteering? Why are they not donating? Why are they not doing it? Why does the government feel that we don't need to have sex education? Or why don't we have sex education? Why are people against it? And what we do is we bring those up in our argument, and then you get to bring up your evidence that says, haha, but you are wrong. Or that is an old way of thinking. Or those statistics no longer work. Or that is not going to be the case in 5 years because of this projection. So as Aristotle told us, we are going to show them the error of their ways through this main point. So we will make a claim about why they disagree, and then we'll concede and say, although that was once a great idea or something. And then we'll say, no longer does that work. And then we'll provide them the evidence that says, haha, that doesn't work, and that's why you need to do this instead. Does that make sense to y'all? But for the purpose of right now, what I want you to come to understand is all you are going to write is the main point. And all the main point is here are so what are the, as we say, the causes as to why your audience doesn't agree or is So why is your audience not agreeing? Or why are they hesitant about taking on your policy? So in your thesis, it would look something like, and it makes, oftentimes it helps people instead to say the words, the reasons. So you're more than welcome to say something like that. We'll first discuss the problem with drinking and driving. Then I will discuss the reasons. Yes, why people drink and drive. Awesome sauce. And finally, I will. So you've told me that there's a problem. You've convinced me that my ways are wrong. Oh, is that what we should do? Yeah, if you're telling me that I should do something, then give me some options as how I should do it. So your last main point, friends, are your three solutions to enacting the policy. So I will put down here, and finally, I will offer some solutions. And I'm going to put solutions, because if it's the one plan that you're implementing, I'll go with that. Offer some solutions to not drink and drive, because that's my policy. I don't want you to drink and drive, and I'm going to offer you some solutions to not drink and drive. And remember, so now I have a plan, and that plan, hopefully it starts with a pra, ends with a good tool. Oh, good, and it's practical. So each of you are going to have the exact same main points. Problems, causes, solutions. Does this make sense to y'all? Does anybody have one that they want me to go over that you were thinking about this weekend? Oh, yeah.
I'm thinking about the use of plastic.
Okay.
I know that's kind of like broad.
So you can so to persuade my audience.
Plastic straws.
That's what I was thinking.
Sure, you can do plastic straws.
I can hook you up with some statistics.
Yeah. Okay. And do you want us to not use plastic straws, or do you want them to be banned in all of Los Angeles?
Both, whatever.
Well, good. Now you just said both, but we need to have one audience. Does that make sense? Okay. because the ways that those solutions work and like who's disagreeing and who's not, it's all a little bit different. The problems, yeah.
Can I do euthanasia?
You can to persuade my audience that,
It's okay to kill yourself if you want to.
yeah, that it should be.
Legal.
There we go. So to persuade my audience, yeah, the euthanasia should be legalized. And if you wanted to qualify that, you could. If you wanted to qualify, like when, under what
In what
circumstances.
situations? Okay, makes sense.
If you wanted to, in that proposition, if you can qualify it, go
Yeah.
for it. But otherwise, yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
And to persuade my audience is perfect, and then you know that it's passive agreement. We can't like do anything about it, legality, but when it comes time, we can. So you're right. Like those
Right.
solutions will be like calling your senators or governors. Like I said, no need to wait till the last minute. Feel free to email me. You don't even have to wait for the posting. I can help you out with that beforehand. Otherwise, tonight by midnight, post to the discussion board your general purpose specific purpose thesis statement. Tomorrow, check back and make any changes by midnight. I'll email you when they're up. And then the last thing that you will do is on Thursday, simply bring in a printed copy of your approved topic, or you can handwrite it out as well. But I will remind you of all of this, as well as the assignments via an email later on today.
Sounds good.
All right, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
wonderful rest of your day. Feel good. Stay